Today, we're diving into something pretty wild. This isn't a movie script or some conspiracy theory from a forum. It's a formal criminal complaint that was actually filed with the U.S. Department of Justice, and the story it tells alleges a conspiracy that stretches from a local family court all the way to matters of national security.
This line, pulled right from the document itself, really sets the stage. It's not just legal jargon, it's a powerful accusation. The claim is that the justice system itself can be hijacked and used as a weapon. And the rest of this document tries to lay out exactly how that could happen.
So you have to be asking, who on earth would make claims this bold? Well, it all comes from one person. And the complaint makes a big point of arguing that his very specific background is the reason these claims should be taken seriously.
The author is a man named Reynaldo Aguiar Marcano. Now, his resume is unique. The source material points out he's a former Google engineer who is an expert in analyzing massive amounts of data. But on top of that, he's a recognized political refugee with protected status. The argument being made is that this gives him both the technical chops to uncover a complex scheme and the real-world experience of standing up to powerful, corrupt systems.
But here's the twist. This giant web of alleged treason and espionage, it doesn't start in some shadowy government building. According to the complaint, it all kicks off in a very familiar, very personal setting, a messy family court case. The complaint zeroes in on this single 24-hour window as ground zero for the alleged cover-up. So on the evening of March 28th, Aguiar's son is taken from his home. He calls 911. But the deputy who shows up allegedly won't even take a report. And get this, he admits he had already talked to the other party earlier that same day. Then, after Aguiar asks the deputy a hypothetical question, his son is suddenly put on indefinite leave from school the very next morning. The complaint presents this as a coordinated plan, not a series of coincidences designed to cut him off from his son.
Okay, so from there, the complaint pivots from the street to the courtroom. And this is where it gets technical, but stick with me because this is the heart of the legal argument. It details a specific scheme that it calls fraud upon the court, basically accusing them of rigging the game with bogus documents.
And it all comes down to this one document, filed on October 10th. Now, the title, Notice of Entry Temporary Orders, sounds totally boring and routine, right? But the complaint argues that title was a deliberate lie. It was really a notice for a future hearing, but it was worded to trick a higher court into thinking a final decision had already been signed by the judge.
And apparently the plan worked, and it worked fast. Just 4 days later, the Court of Appeals threw out Aguiar's case. The complaint says they did it because they were relying on that misleading notice. They thought the case was already over and done with.
So here's the alleged playbook, broken down. Step 1. File a notice in the lower court that makes it seem like an order already exists. Step 2. Use that notice to convince the higher appeals court to kill the case. And then, Step 3. Only after the appeal is dead and gone, you go back and get the judge to actually sign the order. The complaint argues this was the exact fraudulent mechanism they used. And then we get what the complaint calls the written confession. In a later court filing, the opposing lawyer flatly states as a fact that the orders were signed by the court on October 15th. So why is that date, that single date, so incredibly important? Well, that one-day gap is everything. On October 14th, the appeals court kills the case because they think a signed order exists. But on October 15th, the very next day, the opposing counsel admits in writing that the order was just then being signed. The complaint frames this as the smoke and gun, absolute proof that the appeals court was tricked into ruling on an order that literally did not exist yet.
Now, these allegations of fraud are then used to build an even bigger case under the RICO Act. You've probably heard of it. It's the powerful federal law created to take down organized crime. The complaint argues that using things like email to pull off this court scheme qualifies as wire fraud, which is exactly the kind of thing you need to build a RICO case against the law firm.
But it doesn't stop with fraud and racketeering. The complaint alleges that the real motive for this whole elaborate court scheme was to shut down a much, much bigger criminal operation, one with ties to national security. And this is where the whole thing just explodes in scale.
And the key number here is 20,000. The complaint claims the real reason for all of this was to bury a class action lawsuit, a lawsuit that involved the illegal surveillance of more than 20,000 American citizens.
So according to the introduction of the complaint, the evidence for this huge class action lawsuit came from a database leaked by Venezuelan intelligence. This data supposedly exposed a network involved in mass surveillance that had connections to the narco-terrorist group El Cartel de los Soles. So the family court fraud, it's alleged, was just the tool they needed to kill this massive lawsuit before anyone ever heard about it.
So facing a hearing that he believed was a total sham, Aguirre did something pretty extreme. He filed this document directly into the court record. And just look at that title. Emergency Verified Notice of Ongoing Conspiracy to Commit Terrorist Acts and Treason. I mean, that is not a title you see in court documents. Ever.
And as you can see on this page, he was not being dramatic. He was formally accusing the judge and the other lawyers of committing specific federal crimes, and he cited the statutes to back it up: witness tampering, terrorism enhancement, and yes, treason. He's basically arguing that using the courts to silence a federal witness isn't just illegal, it's a terrorist act.
So after all of these absolutely explosive allegations, from a simple family court dispute all the way up to federal treason, what is the endgame here? What does this document actually want?
At the end of the day, this whole thing is a formal request submitted to the U.S. Department of Justice. It's aimed right at their public integrity section, the unit that investigates crimes by public officials. It's a demand for a full-blown federal criminal investigation into every judge, lawyer, and cop named in its pages.
The allegations in this document are, frankly, extraordinary. And they really leave us with this one big, unsettling question. It forces you to think. When the very system that's supposed to give you justice is accused of being corrupt, what are you supposed to do? Where do you even turn?